Today marks 3 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion into Ukraine. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and European leaders are marking the anniversary in Kyiv today. The Prime Minister promising to provide Ukraine with $5 billion in seized Russian assets. Now, we know in recent weeks, talks between Russia and the U.S. have intensified, leaving Ukraine uncertain about its future and European allies questioning the future of their security. For more on a pathway forward, we are joined by CTV military analyst, retired Major General David Fraser. Good morning to you.
Lindsey, good morning.
Okay, I want to ask you first about this announcement this morning. Canada sending $5 billion in aid to Ukraine using funds from seized Russian assets. When I hear $5 billion in seized assets, I mean, what are these assets?
Well, there'll be bank accounts. There'll be, whatever assets, including, quite frankly, airplanes and things like that, that Canada seized from Russian individuals and companies at the beginning of the war. So, essentially the bank accounts and whatnot that they've got their hands on, and they won't allow them to be transferred back to or used by those Russian individuals or companies. They're now going to just take the money. They're going to take the money and they're going to give it to Ukraine. It's a huge statement, political statement by the Prime Minister, over and above the vehicles, that they're going to give this money back to the Ukraine to fight. So Putin's not going to be happy. And it's a busy week this week when you got France, Great Britain, and the UN all debating on what's going on, led by the Prime Minister of Canada with this action. So it's pretty good news.
It's big news. Obviously, we've been talking about the relationship between U.S. and Russia, and Ukraine involved in that as well. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he would step down in exchange for NATO membership if that meant bringing peace to Ukraine. This in response to U.S. President Donald Trump calling Zelensky a, quote, dictator. Is that something the U.S. president is after, do you think?
Well, Donald Trump really negotiates by beating up his opponents and trying to get as much as he can. I think he really does believe that. And I think he really does want to get him off there so that he can put somebody else in that's going to be more malleable. And I think what Zelensky's doing is just showing just how much he's prepared to give up, including position as the president, to save his own country. So you're seeing politics at the highest level, both from Putin, Trump, and Zelensky. This is a heavyweight fight right now.
It really is. The Trump administration asking Ukraine to hand over their revenue from natural resources in exchange for continued aid, but not necessarily security. What would Ukraine get out of that agreement?
In a word, not much. They'd give away all their rare earth minerals and resources to the United States. So it's not a very good deal for Ukraine. It's a great deal for the United States. And again, it just puts, Putin in a stronger economic situation vis-a-vis Ukraine. So, President Zelensky is really fighting hard this week, and since the president's got back, to try to save his country against one of his biggest partners so far, which is the U.S.
U.S. and Russian officials are set to talk again this week. Ukraine, again, not included in these discussions. If the U.S. and Russia do agree on some sort of solution to end this war, what option will that leave Ukraine?
It won't leave Ukraine very many options, but in fact, it's Ukraine, it's Europe, and it's the UN, all of which are not happy that they are all being excluded from these discussions between the U.S. and Russia. So this is lining up in, Zelensky's feeling very alone, but at the same time, he's being surrounded by, countries like Canada, the UN, and Europe. Because they're not happy that all of her are excluded from these talks, and he doesn't have to accept it in the end, and that's just going to make the politics even more, problematic.
So we started this segment by talking about, Prime Minister is in Kyiv right now, Prime Minister Trudeau, several European leaders are there, also to discuss peace and security. President Trump has made it clear that Europe does not have a seat at the table right now. So what leverage does Europe have at this point? What role are they playing?
Well, in fact, we're seeing two of their major leaders over in Washington this week with France and United Kingdom. Both are going to be putting pressure on that they have to have a seat at the table. And this could turn out into political isolation, but more importantly, it's probably an economic war between the United States and Europe, all over in support of Ukraine, because what happens in Ukraine affects Europe. So this is just making politics and economics even more problematic.
if Ukraine was admitted into a larger body like a NATO or European Union, how do you think Russia would likely respond to that?
Well, Russia right now is, coming in from the freeze, and they won't be happy about NATO. And I think, NATO understands that too. By saying they have a path to, to get into NATO is one thing, but getting into NATO, they're a long way from doing that. But being a member of the EU from an economic point of view is probably more realistic. Russia probably would be okay with the EU, but they would not be okay with NATO. And again, this is about politics and about how much can Ukraine get from its partners in Europe.
It is fascinating to watch. Retired Major General David Fraser, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.